Hey guys, it's Nathan from the Kentucky Cycling YouTube channel. Welcome to the next Zoom interview in the Kentucky Cycling Connection series. The focus of today's interview is going to be on the Trans-America Bike Trail, with an emphasis on the section that actually goes through Kentucky, which is US Bicycle Route 76. The Trans-America Trail began as the route for the Bike Centennial, which was a mass bicycle tour across the country to celebrate the US Bicentennial in 1976. The route was developed by Adventure Cycling Association and was the first ever bicycle touring route to cross the nation. US Bike Route 76 crosses the state from west to east, or vice versa, and Kentucky has the distinction of being only one of 10 states on the route. For the purposes of today's interview, I was able to gather together 3 cyclists who have experienced riding through multiple states along the trail, and all of whom traversed Kentucky this year. Without any further delay, let's meet our guests, starting with an overview of their experiences with the Trans-America Trail. But be sure to stay tuned as we dig into more details and learn more about the section that goes through Kentucky based upon their riding experiences.
Yeah, so my name is Natalie Jones. I live in Lexington, Kentucky, and my cycling journey has been kind of all over the place, but it actually started when I was in college, and I did my first triathlon on a hybrid bike with like no experience at all. And that's kind of how it started, and then kicked up to different levels of triathlon. And then it just became fascinated with cycling and doing different of the Kentucky Cycling Challenge and doing different of the century rides and metric rides throughout Kentucky, and just fell in love with it. Had never done bike packing at all, never done just like an overnight trip. I saw something on Facebook last year, and it was about a female who did the Trans Am, and I read her blog and just got really excited about it. Shared the story with my brother over Thanksgiving, and basically we're like, okay, like we can do this, we should do this. And we kept talking about it, and then it happened. And in January we started planning, and we were able to take the summer off and able to get our directors from work on board with us leaving. And that was our first bike trip, was across America. Go big or go home. That's we just really went for it. So that's kind of our story of how we started with the bike packing.
Yeah, so I'm Zach. Natalie's my sister. I was born and raised in Lexington, Kentucky, but live out in the Bay Area in California now, which is actually where we started our trip. I got into cycling, I suppose, because I have bad knees, and I was more of a runner, but miles were adding up, sore knees, and cycling was a good way to reduce the impact, as well as with notorious Bay Area traffic. I started commuting to work via bicycle. Even though it was about 18 miles, I could do it on a bike faster than I could do it in a car, which is a little bit absurd. I had some cycling experience, followed in the steps of Natalie, trying to keep up with her and her triathlon. So developed my road cycling a bit more that way. Got some relative comfort riding in the crowded Bay Area, riding on streets with cars and things like that. So felt semi-confident that we had what it took to make it cross country. I'd done some backpacking trips, some hiking backpacking trips before. So had a little bit of experience with that, and figured if I can do that and I can ride a bike, I can put the two together, and between the two of us, we'd figure the rest of it out.
Cool. So for those of you who might be looking at Natalie's face and thinking that she actually looks a little bit familiar, I'll say that this is not her first appearance on the Connection series. She sits on the board of Bike Walk Kentucky, which she referenced in her introduction. And I interviewed her in the earlier part of this year, along with Sharon Brown, as one of the co-directors of the Kentucky Cycling Challenge. Some follow-up questions for Natalie and Zach. So you mentioned that you guys are siblings. Who's the older sibling?
That would be me.
Are you used to your little sister coming to you with challenges like this and say, hey, big brother, let's go across the country?
Maybe not quite that directly, but yeah, she slides them in there every once in a while. By the way, I did this. What do you think?
Yeah, well, cool. So tell me a little bit how you guys approached this route prior to Natalie going on the trip. She mentioned that your parents may be providing some support along the way. So did you carry your own gear, or did they provide assistance, or was it sort of a mix and match? How did you approach it?
Yeah, I think it was a hybrid approach. We were able to we did the Western Express. So we started in California, and My brother is obviously from California. And so my fiance and his wife were able to actually join us for the state of California. So we actually had a third cyclist with us, but he was lucky to where he didn't have to worry about carrying his bags. Zach's wife was able to be in a car and meet us where we ended. For that trip for California, we carried everything. And then our parents were able to join us in Colorado for a little bit. And Zach was, you can chime in, but Zach was a purist in terms of we're going to carry our stuff. Even though they're here with us, we're still going to carry the weight and we're going to do it. So we were able to still carry the weight, but they were there if we needed them. A lot of times they would go out and go through all the different national parks and have a day themselves. But then again, just kind of meet us wherever we were ending to check in and make sure all was well. So yeah, they kind of like hopped in and out. But then when we rode through Kentucky, we took an off day in Lexington, so hung out at home. And then we were able to meet up with them again in Virginia. So they kind of mix and match their approach. So it was a little bit of both.
Cool. Did you have a traditional bike touring setup or more of a bike packing setup? Tell me about the gear that you were using.
Yeah, we both had, I think, traditional touring bikes and set up with the panniers and bags. I started with 2 rear bags, 2 front bags, and a handlebar bag. We realized after climbing a giant mountain to get up to Lake Tahoe on the border of California and Nevada that I probably didn't need all that weight. We haven't not done anything like this before. I think we had overpacked a little bit. We were doing this over the summer in June and July. And we had some cold weather gear just in case, and realized we probably weren't going to need most of that. So actually dropped off when my wife left those small front bags and front pannier with her, and rode the rest of the way with just the rear and the handlebar bag.
Okay. And did you all camp or stay in hotels or some combination?
Also a combination there. We did a lot more camping in like the western half of the trip. As we started into Nevada, I don't know if you all recall this summer, there was just a massive heat wave that went across the West in particular, the whole country really, but really the West. So most of the days that we were riding in Nevada and Utah, it was hitting 115 to 120 most days. So we pretty quickly adapted our riding style. We were up, 5 in the morning on the road, ideally before 6, would ride till maybe try to be off the road by around like 2 o'clock each afternoon. It was already well over 100 degrees at that point. After one day pulling off at 2 p.m. and then sitting in a hot tent for the rest of the day, we realized, this just isn't real comfortable or enjoyable, and we want to enjoy the trip. So we opted for hotels more often than not, just to be able to find a place to cool down. Because a lot of these towns that we were riding through, population probably less than 100 or 200 people. There might be 1, maybe 2 really small hotels in town, but nowhere where you could really go sit in air conditioning and get out of the heat.
Talk to me about what states you went through and at what point you met up with the Trans Am Trail.
Yeah, so we did the Western Express. So we started in California. I think the Western Express is obviously shorter than if you were to do the full Trans Am and starting in Astoria, Oregon, but there's more climbing. So I think that's why a lot of people choose not to do the Western Express. I think Zach and I both ended up really enjoying the Western Express. I really enjoyed it because we got to meet up with some other cyclists who started around the same time that we did. And because, like Zach was mentioning, out west in the towns that we were in, they were so small and so spread out that you could only go 70 miles a day because there was like nothing in between point A and point B. And so that was cool because we got to actually meet up with cyclists, even though we weren't necessarily riding with them throughout the day. We would see them from point A to point B. So we got to like build a relationship with some of the people and staying in contact with them. And we were riding with them for probably a week or so through Nevada. Yeah, so we did California, Nevada, and Utah. And then we hopped on to the Trans Am in Pueblo in Colorado. Actually, that's how we celebrated my 30th birthday, was in Pueblo, and hopping on the Trans Am the next day. So it was a good birthday to hop on the Trans Am. And like once we hopped on the Trans Am, it was crazy. We started seeing so many other cyclists. Like we saw like 3 or 4 who we were with on the Western Express. And then like every day we were running into like 10 or 8 other cyclists going in the opposite direction. And so that was fun just to like pull over and talk to people and get some tips about what was coming up.
Cool. And you mentioned the climbing, so I guess you're referencing, I guess you guys had to climb over like the Sierra Nevadas. So that would have been some elevation early in your ride. It's pretty cool stuff. So tell me about how many miles you guys average per day and how long it actually took you to make your way across the country.
It took us 55 days to make our way across. So we moved, I think, quicker than normal than some of the people who we were around, but we both had jobs. So we had an incentive to come back to work. Average, I think, definitely was kind of up in the air. What do you think? Like 70 miles or so was probably average.
Average, I think, yeah, 70, 75. Longest day, I think, was 118. Our shortest day was probably around 50 miles. And that would have been when we were probably in the Rockies.
Where was your 118-mile day?
Was our last?
That was
last
Kansas
day.
into Missouri.
Okay. I'm curious to know, how much training did you actually do ahead of your ride?
It's a tough question to answer. I feel like not a lot compared to maybe what we should have done or compared to normal. Like we mentioned in the beginning, both of us are triathletes and so used to cycling a lot already. So we didn't really do anything out of the norm. I just kind of made sure that I was on my bike. I didn't mention this, but I did get a new bike for this trip specifically. So I got a Surly disc trucker to be able to ride across the country, and there was a bike shortage during this time. So I actually was only able to like ride my bike that I was going to be biking across the US on twice before I had to ship it out to California. So yeah, I feel like it probably would have been smarter to get more rides on it. It worked. And I think it's the same thing. Like we were gone for so long that we definitely were able to work ourselves into shape. Like you just get your road legs. The first week we were sore. And then after that, it was just normal day.
Cool.
I had actually done a half Ironman race about 3 weeks before we started. So my focus was entirely on getting ready for that. And figured if I could do that, I would be in decent enough shape, which turned out to be about right. Just a lot more climbing, as you mentioned, like getting into the Sierras. That was like day 2 and 3 of riding, which was a kind of a rough way to be introduced to it. So just going straight uphill for 7 hours. It's also absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, the other thing that was kind of funny, neither of us had ever ridden with, loaded down bags and panniers and things like that. So we actually maybe 2 days before we left, strapped them on and just rode around my neighborhood with bags and weight for the first time. So we really were getting a feel for it all like right at the end, right before we started the trip.
Well, that's pretty incredible. I mean, always there's one of my favorite cycling books is called Miles from Nowhere, and it's about this California couple who started off on a world tour, and the wife hadn't ridden more than like 30 miles and had never ridden with weight, and of course she got very fit, lots of experience. So you all went from having less experience than I do to now considerably more experience. Pretty cool that you can do that all in the course of one trip. I'll say one thing that I really like about multi-day rides is that those kind of adventures often lend themselves to particularly memorable moments that'll stick with you for the rest of your life. And so I'm interested if each of you might be able to share a particularly memorable moment or story from your journey that you think will stay with you for the rest of your life.
One of the, I would say, more memorable days for me, just because I thought it was absolutely stunning and incredible experience. This was in Colorado. We started in Dolores, where we'd stayed the night before. This is kind of as you're starting to get into the Rockies, and what a lot of people don't realize is the Rockies are super tall, but the climbing is actually a lot less steep than, say, like the Appalachians or even, frankly, the Ozarks. So we had a ride that was starting in Dolores, and we were following the Dolores River up. And it was probably about, if I recall correctly, 35, 40 plus miles of climbing. Wow. But pretty gradual. Most of it was, around a 3, maybe 4% grade, occasionally going a little bit higher, but pretty gentle overall. So, and it was just a gorgeous morning in the mountains. Like you're surrounded by trees, you're following this river. Natalie mentioned we'd met some fellow cyclists, and we'd stayed the night before in Dolores where another cyclist was. We'd grabbed dinner together. We started off in the morning around the same time, so we spent some time with him. And as we were probably not even 40 minutes into the ride, we had pulled off for a little breakfast snack. and saw a bear cross the road.
Wow.
So that was very memorable in itself. We saw 2 bears on the trip, but that one was the first one that we saw. And that was kind of cool. But then we continued to follow the Dolores River up. And at the top, you get to Lizard Head Pass, which is probably just the top moment for me in the entire trip from a scenery and like achievement perspective. Because it's this real long, gradual, but long climb. And then you get to the top of Lizard Head Pass and you're just surrounded by 14,000 foot peaks and snow caps. And even though it's in, June, in the middle of June, and it was just absolutely stunning. That was one of the more memorable moments for me.
For riding, my most memorable state in general was Utah. I had never been to Utah before, so just a totally different scenery, like all the red rocks and going through everything. And when we were in Utah, we were actually able to like bike through a lot of national parks. And so it was just absolutely stunning to be a part of that. And so Capitol Reef National Park was one of my favorites to bike through. And then we actually, the next day, it wasn't a national park. We kind of didn't have any expectations for the day, but it ended up being absolutely stunning. And
the stretch from Hanksville to Blanding, and you ride past the Colorado River. There's like a recreation area down there.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. And it was adventure cycling. We were joking, adventure cycling has done it again. Like we were just out in the middle of nowhere with beautiful scenery, and maybe we saw 3 cars like the entire time we were out there. So it was just like we got to enjoy the spectacular day all to ourselves. It was like a predominantly downhill grade, so it was like easy cycling. So it was just like, this is perfect. So that was probably my favorite day.
Cool. Before we turn to Paul, I'll say one of my favorite bike travel quotes comes from the famous author Ernest Hemingway, who wrote, "It is by riding a bicycle that you learn the contours of a country best, since you have to sweat up the hills and coast down them." So having recently crossed the country by bike, what are some observations that each of you might offer about the overall contours of our country?
It actually reminds me of a quote that a fellow cyclist told us along the way. He had said, this gentleman was a retired police officer, and just incredible story. He was doing it on his own, the full Trans Am, self-supported. But he was saying, you can fly across the country and miss everything. You can drive across the country and see some things along the way, but you can't really experience it and feel the contours of our country unless you ride it. And you get to feel, is Kansas really that flat? It's actually not. Where's it heat? Where's the humidity really start? And I think more than, just the contours of the road itself, it's the people. And the experiences that you get along the way. So many of these small towns, they're used to seeing cyclists come through, and they're just amazingly friendly. And you realize it doesn't matter where you are, what the color of the state was in the last election, or whether it's close to a city or not, or any of the demographics. Like, people are just kind, and that was really refreshing to me. I mean, we had people offer to buy us snacks and pizza and ice cream. We had, people pull over on the side of the road and just like hand us a Gatorade out the window of their car. I think you realize that we're all people, we're all humans, and it doesn't take that much effort to be kind. And when you are, it makes a huge difference to someone's day.
That's great. How about you, Natalie?
I think he nailed it, but I think that was one of the things that both of us wanted to was also just to make sure, to reiterate that there are good people in the world, I think, with everything that has been going on. And so it was refreshing to feel that way. And we never felt unsafe, and people were so gracious with, even like Zach mentioned, like on the side of the road, if we stopped, people would ask if we were okay, would offer us items. And then also even where we stayed in the small towns, people would give us advice about what was coming up. They were like, expect the Mormon crickets. They were just giving us heads up on what was happening. And so it was just really kind. And then for me, it was just a beautiful way to experience the US. I had never been to Utah. So seeing something completely different than what I'm used to in Kentucky. And then even biking in Kentucky, I'm used to biking in horse country, and where we were wasn't necessarily horse country at all. We really didn't go through horse farms. It was amazing to see everything and to experience it firsthand.
Very good. So let's turn our attention to Paul.
My name's Paul Suchecki. I live in Southern Illinois, down near Carbondale. I'm a school teacher, so that gives me time off in the summer to ride my bike. My first bike trip was when I was 17. It was right after I graduated from high school. Me and some friends were going to ride our bike, just go crazy. Of course, at the last minute, they decided not to go. So it was either not go or go by myself. So I rode my bike from my home. I grew up in northern Illinois near Chicago. I rode from the Chicago suburbs up to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where my uncle lived. And it took me about 5 days, and it was just the adventure of my life. And I was hooked. And so just about every summer after that, I've tried to get out and do some bike touring. I'm 58 now, and over the last 40 years, I've put in about 40,000 miles, just all in the United States. I've dipped into Canada a little bit, but I've never been, to Europe. So all my touring's been in the U.S. I'm a member of the Adventure Cycling Association, and so the maps there are helpful. I love doing their routes, but, before I heard about adventure cycling, you just take out a Rand McNally and just see where you want to go, and just go there. I make videos now. That's kind of my latest hobby. And, I'm a school teacher, and so I wanted to share some of my rides with my students and just kind of, get them intrigued or whatever. And so just showing them a photo album of, pictures just didn't cut it. And so I started making these videos to share with my students, and they seem to like it. And when I'm making these videos, those are the people that I consider them my audience. Those are the people I'm talking to are my students.
Very good. So in case some of you guys are looking at Paul's face and thinking, hey, that guy looks familiar, I want to mention that Paul has actually a YouTube channel where he publishes these really cool and informative videos about his bike tours. And so for those of you who want to learn more about various places to tour, I invite you to check out his YouTube channel. And I can say that more than one of his videos have actually contributed directly to my own bucket list of places I want to ride. And his channel actually includes both the dreaded middle third of the Trans Am Trail, as he labels it, as well as the eastern third of the Trans-American Trail, which he recently completed. Have you done any other sections of the Trans Am, or is it the two that are on your YouTube channel that you've actually done?
Actually, the first video I made was on the Western Express. And
okay, cool.
I admire you guys for your very first bike tour to go across Nevada. That's pretty high commitment. It's pretty extreme environment for your very first bike tour. I've been across Nevada without knowing it. In 1985, I did most of the western part of the Trans-America. A friend of mine, I did get a friend of mine to go with me, and we started in Seattle, Washington, went across the North Cascades through Idaho, and then down through Yellowstone Park. We went through Missoula, Montana, and then through Yellowstone across Wyoming and all that. So we were on and off the Trans Am in 85, and we didn't even know it. We'd never even heard of Bike Centennial, but we met some riders that were doing it, and they had maps and everything. And so I've done most of the western portion, but not directly.
Okay. And then tell us where you started and ended each of your section rides on the Trans Am for the middle third and then for the eastern section.
For the middle third, I started in Pueblo. My wife and I were out on a car camping trip out west. And on the way home, I had my bicycle with me, and I just had her drop me off in Pueblo, and then she drove the rest of the way home. And then I rode from Pueblo to home, which is in Carbondale. Carbondale, Illinois is right on the Trans-America. I love Carbondale. It's the only place I know where there are 3 bicycle shops all on one block, and a camping store like 2 blocks away. So it's like biker paradise for the Midwest anyway. Well, in 2020, that was the year of the pandemic, and so everything was kind of shut down. So I didn't go anywhere. And then so this summer, I just decided to pick up the Trans Am from my home in southern Illinois and head out to Yorktown. I'd done that stretch before in 2016, but just with my still camera, I just took pictures. But this summer, the intent was to make a video. I started in southern Illinois and rode to Yorktown, across Kentucky and Virginia, and tried to film everything I could find along the way.
Well, very good. So I'll definitely include a link to that video, particularly of the Eastern Third. It's fair to say that your rides along the Trans Am were all self-supported, correct? So
Yes.
So for those who may be newer to bike touring, can you talk a little bit about what that means for you in terms of your setup?
Well, obviously you have to carry a little bit more gear. When I first started touring, I would camp out all the time, and rarely stay at a motel, only as kind of a treat or as in a case of an emergency. But now that I'm older, hotels are the way to go for me. Air conditioning. I love to have air conditioning and sleep in a bed and, order out whatever, take a shower. But I still carry my tent. It's a very lightweight tent. I carry a stove, sleeping bag, a little cook set, just in case, because when you're in the middle of Nevada or the middle of Kansas, there's not always a hotel right when you need one, and so you may have to camp out. So I'm prepared for just about anything.
Good deal. So I know part of the answer to this because I've watched your videos, but in terms of training, tell me about how much training you did ahead of each of the section rides that you did for the Trans Am.
I try to get out on the weekends. I work during the week, so it's hard to get out in the evenings and do any long rides. But on Saturday and Sunday, I try to get out and at least get 20 or 30 miles in. If I'm building up for a big ride, I'll try to get in 60 or 80 miles on a weekend, just to get my legs in shape. But really, and if you've ever done any cross-country bike riding, you know this, there's really no way to get in shape and fully prepare for it. You try to get your legs ready, you try to get your hands and your butt and all that stuff hardened for the trip, but that first week is always tough. But once you get over that first week, like you say, it's a piece of cake. Just you get up in the morning and you ride. But I'll tell you, you guys are young still, and as you get older, it gets tougher. And this past summer, I had to take more rest days than usual. When I was 25 or 30, I would ride 7-8 days in a row, 10 days in a row, and not take a break. Now I'll ride 3 days and I need a rest day. So I've been taking a lot more rest days than usual. And you kind of gradually build into it, so at the end of the trip, maybe instead of every 3 days you take a rest day, now it's every 5 days you take a rest day. The recovery time as you get older is a little bit longer. The thing I love about bike touring is when I'm done, I feel so strong and I feel like I can do just about anything. And that lasts about 2 or 3 weeks, and then you get out of shape again, it goes away.
Well, it's nice while it lasts.
Yeah.
I guess the only solution to that is just to keep going, right?
That's right. There's an old saying, if you want to keep moving, you got to keep moving.
Yeah, that's great. What about, memories from any of your experiences along the Trans Am? I'll ask more about Kentucky later.
Back in '85, I was riding a portion of the Trans Am in Oregon across the Cascades over Mackenzie Pass. And anybody that's rode the Trans Am, not the Western Express, but, from Astoria to Missoula, going over Mackenzie Pass is quite the adventure. And the road happened to be closed that day. They had snow at the top. The sign said snow barricade. And we thought, what the heck, we'll just walk around the snow barricade. So we climbed up this pass. It was about 20, 25 miles up, and it was cold, and it started raining, and we got to the top, and it was snowing, and then we started seeing snow on the side of the roads, and I thought, all right, we're getting up in the snow country. And then I saw the snow plow buried in a pile of snow, and then I thought, we're in trouble. The snow plow was buried, and then the road stopped, and it was just snow. Where they stopped plowing it. And so I thought, and I was cold and it was raining. And I thought we could either go back down 20 miles and freeze or just keep going. So we kept going. I threw my bike up on my shoulder and just started. And of course, I was 25 at the time, so it was, it was a little bit stronger then. So I just threw my bike up on my shoulder and started trudging through the snow. It was about 2 miles. We got to where they started plowing up the other side of the pass, and it was paved road again. And by that time it was dark. And so we went down Mackenzie Pass in the dark, and we got to Sisters. and got a motel. Even though it was hard, but that sticks out, you know.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'm sure that bubbles up in your memory really quickly. So.
You know, it's fun. You tell people about it. You go, wow, that sounds dangerous. Like at the time, I was like, it makes you feel alive, right?
Oh yeah, that's great. Well, Paul, from watching a number of your videos, I gather that you approach most of your tours as a solo rider. Can you talk a little bit about what you enjoy about doing solo tours?
Mostly because I don't know anybody else that bike tours. My friends won't go. They think I'm all crazy. My wife won't go. I wish I had a brother or sister that went, but everybody thinks I'm crazy. And that was another reason for making the videos, was to show people that I'm not the only crazy person that does this.
That's great.
I get to make my own decisions if I want to stop for the day or if I want to stop for lunch at a particular place. Or I like to take a lot of breaks because I meet people along the way and we start riding together. And usually we go at a different pace. Most of the time they're faster than me and I can't keep up. So they just ride on. Or I go too fast for them. That's usually the thing. Again, you get to make your own decisions. You know, the downside is you don't have anybody to share the adventure with. You know, and again, that's part of the video thing. It's a chance to share the adventure with people.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
You got a lot of time to think, you know, a lot of head time, you know, where you just, if you got a problem and you just think about it and mull it over and kind of untangle, maybe people don't like to do that. But if you don't mind spending time in your own head, then it's not too bad.
So one thing that I really enjoy about your videos so much is that I think you've really developed your own unique style. And you take vlogging approach, I think, in the truest sense of the word, and that you really creating like a log or a video diary of your experience. And you take time to stop and reflect about various things you've seen along the way. And you do a nice job of highlighting history and sites worth stopping and seeing. Another aspect of your videos that I really like is this animated hand-drawn maps that you include.
Oh, you like those?
Oh,
right.
For sure. So my question is, are the maps that you include in your videos something that you actually use during your tours, or is that something you create specifically for your videos?
I prefer a paper map over GPS because that's all I've ever used was Rand McNally's. And, you know, I like the adventure cycling maps. They're more detailed and close up, but it doesn't give you a lot of information off the route. But I basically just trace those maps off of a Rand McNally and just highlight some of the major points along the way. And
now that we've gotten an overview of our guest experience with Trans-America Trail as a whole, I wanted to dig into each of your experiences about riding through Kentucky. So how many days did you guys take to do your relative rides through Kentucky, and how many miles did you ride each day?
We didn't do a video, but I've got a notebook here where I wrote down every day. Where are we staying? Where are we trying to go the next day? So let's see. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days to get across Kentucky, and we had plus 1 day. We did do a rest day in Lexington, which was actually technically off route. 7 days of riding.
What about you, Paul?
About the same. About 7 days of riding. I took more rest days though. But yeah, I hit a stretch of bad weather too, where it rained for about 4 days straight. But yeah, it took me about 7 days to get across Kentucky.
What are some of your key takeaways from your experience in traversing the state? And I'll pose that question to all three of you.
I'd say the biggest takeaway for me is that the western half and the eastern half of the state are very, very different. The western half felt much more, you know, being from Lexington, it felt a little bit more like a homecoming to me. Rolling hills, you know, familiar accents and regional grocery chains and things like that that we would ride by. But then the eastern half of the state, once you get to Berea, really, and east of Berea, you start getting into the Appalachians. And that's just a part of Kentucky that I had not spent much time in growing up. And not only is the riding different because you're up in the mountains and it's just much more difficult riding conditions, it's a whole nother world in terms of the types of towns that you're going through, the facilities that are available, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but the dogs as well.
Okay. Paul, what about you?
Well, I love Kentucky. Even though I'm not from Kentucky, you know, I live about 45 minutes from Paducah, but, you know, we drove across Kentucky on the interstate, and it's lovely. but riding on the Trans Am is just a completely different experience. And you see it's like a different state. It's more rural, and you see, pardon me, some of the rural poverty that's in parts of Kentucky, and you see the coal mining, and like you say, you experience the people, and the people are so generous and so friendly. I mean, I've had people offer me money. I don't need your money, but people just offer me money, or they want to buy me lunch, you know. But yeah, the western part is more rolling hills. And as you get further east, the hills just get steeper and steeper. Once you get past Berea, it's just mountains. And you think, once I get into Virginia, it'll get better. Now, Virginia's just as steep until you get over the Blue Ridge. Yeah, Kentucky's beautiful.
Kentucky is a long state. I don't think people were like, it is a very long state. So there is a lot to experience throughout Kentucky. And I agree, as soon as we crossed the ferry into Kentucky, it felt like home, like farmland, rolling hills, beautiful. And then, like what Paul was mentioning, the eastern part of Kentucky, it was more difficult for me also, like not only with the climbing, but just constantly seeing the poverty. It was hard. It was hard to digest, especially being from the home state. Also, it's just a humbling experience to recognize what's going on in your own state. And that's, again, just a way to see Kentucky that I feel like a lot of people don't experience and go through those back roads unless they're on a bike. So
in terms of topography, you all referenced once you get east to Berea and going into, sort of the hills as we would, call them here. Paul, in your video, you referenced, you said that some folks talk about climbing over the Appalachians as being really among the hardest part of the Trans Am Trail. You were referencing someone else, so I'm curious to know if you felt that way about it in your journey, and Natalie and Zach, what your thoughts were. As someone who's never gone over a long mountain pass, climbs are more gradual but go on for a long time. I get it intellectually, but I've never had that experience.
Well, the steepness and the one after another. Out in the Rockies, it's just kind of gradual, but it might be 20 or 30 miles up, and you just kind of gradually grind your way up. But in Kentucky, the hills are way steeper. They're 8, 10, 12% grades. And they might not be as long, but it's just one after another. And so you're still spending half the day climbing. I think that 6-day section through the Appalachians, the first time I did it in 2016, I wrote down in my journal that was the hardest 6 days of bike touring that I'd ever done. This time when I did, I was a little bit more mentally prepared for it. But the first time I wasn't really mentally prepared, and it was hard.
Do you feel like some of it is visually, I can, and this is again, sort of intellectually thinking about it. It's like, if you're going up a big mountain pass, that once you get to the top, you're going to have this really long downhill. And in the hills of Kentucky, at least, the riding I've done, it's like you can't really get that same sense of what comes next, even on the same hill sometimes, you think you might be towards the top and there's more hill, and so is it, you think it's sort of a mental exercise of not knowing what comes next that makes it harder, or is it physically harder?
It's just physically hard for me at my age anyway. And I keep thinking there's got to be an easier way. When they devised this route back in 1976, I don't think they were thinking, can we find a way with fewer hills? They were just going, let's just go over them hills. And now, as people have done this route, I think they're starting to look for.
Yeah, is there a pass like Cumberland
Gap or something? Is there an easy way to get across the Eastern Divide? And there are.
Yeah,
and they're starting to come up with other routes. But if you want to do the traditional Trans-America, that's a tough section through Eastern Kentucky.
All right. Well, so what was Zach and Natalie, what are y'all's thoughts about having ridden them hills?
I think we had a little different experience. They were still very difficult, but for us, I think the most challenging climbs that we had were the Ozarks. They were very much like the shark teeth in climbing. And we also weren't expecting that at all. Like, no one had warned us about the Ozarks. And so we didn't think anything of it. And then when we were in it, it was a grind. But I will say that climbing in Eastern Kentucky is the only part, like right before we crossed into Virginia, was one of the only days where we were climbing. And I looked back at Zach and was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Like, I don't know. I might have to hop off my bike because it got so steep at the last bit. And luckily he was behind me because he was like, you're not getting off your bike. Like you got this, like we're almost there. Like, and he had the GPS bike computer and I didn't have one on my bike. So he could see like how much farther we had to go. And so luckily it wasn't much farther. So I was able to grind it out, but it was tough. And it was one of those days where we made it to the top. And as soon as we got to the top, I immediately hopped off my bike and just like laid down for a second and was like, I gotta recover. Like that was tough. But that was the only instant where I wanted to hike my bike up. And again, glad that I had someone with me who was like, you're not doing it. We got this. So it's no joke. The Appalachians, they're hard. They are hard.
You know, Zach mentioned this. So it seems that Kentucky has developed a bit of a reputation for encountering dogs along our roadways. So I'm interested to know what your experience was like in terms of encountering dogs along your journey and how you feel, you know, trying to just kind of be fair to Kentucky, whether you feel that reputation is deserved or like, you know, and how it compared to like some other states. And I know Paul, maybe we'll end with you, Paul, because you had a particularly interesting, like a friendship that you developed with a dog in Kentucky. So we'll end with you. So Zach and Natalie, let's start with you guys on that one.
Yeah, no, I think to be completely fair to Kentucky, it's not just a Kentucky thing. We started having encounters with dogs probably in Missouri, through Southern Illinois a couple times, not as much there, but a little bit, and then into Kentucky as well. Kentucky's just, as Natalie mentioned, it's such a long state. That's probably just where most of it happened to be. I'm a dog lover, grew up with dogs. I've got a dog, but it's still scary to have something chasing after you. I think most of the dogs are just, it's a game, right? The problem is that they're just off leash and they're loose. And so when they see something go by that is fast enough that it's interesting, but not so fast like a car that they can't catch it, like it becomes a game to them. And you can, when you get close enough to the dogs by choice or not, like I don't think many of them are really like have vicious intent. They're just kind of running next to you and barking. But there were a few where like you could tell like the look in their eyes was a little bit different. And everybody's got a slightly different way to deal with it. I don't want to downplay the seriousness of it because we did hear a story from a cyclist that we had met up with who had been riding with someone else who a dog chased, and as they tried to ride away, dog kind of bit at the back wheel, caused her to crash, and she ended up breaking her collarbone and having to abandon her ride, which is terrible. Like no one wants to see that. And so it's not to say that like you have to take it seriously, but you also want to do what's comfortable to you. It's kind of counterintuitive, but we found that the more you slow down, the less interested the dogs are. And we actually wrote, you know, we're with some other riders who would say like they would just get off their bike at that point, walk. You can keep a bike between you and the dog if you want to. But if you do that, again, they just kind of lose interest for the most part. So the instinct is often to try to speed up and ride away. But if you're climbing up a big hill, the dogs are probably going to be a little bit faster than you are. And so often slowing down and even getting off the bike is the easiest thing to do. Some people might carry, you know, we met some people who carried pepper spray. We didn't feel comfortable doing that. Wouldn't want to have to use that. But we did have air horns. I'm not sure if those really.
Never used it. Yeah, we never used them. Yeah,
we never actually used them, but we met some other cyclists who had used them with some success, just as something that if it startles the dog just for a second, it gives you a little bit of time. So there's different approaches, but we found often just slowing down and being very stern as if it was your own dog, yelling like, you know, no, bad dog. That's often enough.
Yeah, and I will say I had this is where I am also glad that I had someone with me because I'm also a dog lover. I have a German Shepherd, so looks like a scary dog. And like used to that and like love my dogs that we've grown up with. But I was definitely more scared of the dog situation than Zach was. So I'm glad that I had someone who was able to like remain calm when it first started happening, so that then I could get my footing with it. Because sometimes you could see the dog coming, so you were expecting it and you were aware that it was happening. But we did have a few situations where they snuck up on us, so it can be a little spooky. I do think it's funny because my strategy was also to put Zach between myself and the dog. So I would just maneuver to where Zach was there. So that was really helpful. And then I am not an aggressive person when it comes to like yelling and stuff. So it took me a while to find my voice to like yell at them no. And then I can remember one time we went through a holler in Kentucky, and I feel like it was like dog central. We had like 8 or 9 dogs like all come at us, and I just started yelling and they went away. And even the owners like came out of the house to grab the dogs, and Zach looked at me, he's like, good job, like you yelled and you got their attention. I was like, that's right, I got this. And so I think just like finding your comfort zone with that, and the slowing down was really what helped a lot. Like I said, we carried air horns just in case, but we never had to use them, and just slowing down and yelling was enough. And a dog never really came close to us, but it feels close when you're there.
You guys are offering some good advice, and some of which you picked up from your fellow cyclists. I'll say that can't really be a road cyclist in Kentucky anyway and not have experience with dogs. I'll say that my approach is slightly different. I'm also a dog owner, a dog lover. So I mean, I feel like maybe that gives you a little bit better ability to read them. But, my experience is that most of them are, if they're guarding anything, they're territorial, it's usually their yard, and they're running alongside of you, for the stretch of their property until you're beyond it. And they're like, okay, get off, I'm guarding this thing. My thought is, well, that's kind of their natural instinct. I actually talk sweet to the dogs, and I feel like it kind of diffuses. I've seen situations where, you're, especially if you're anxious and people are yelling, that actually fuels the dog even more sometimes, and so it's one thing if you're kind of calm and you're assertive and you're just saying, no, go home. But if you're like really freaking out and you're like, no, then the dog is going to be like, whoa, so anyway, interesting, just offer that.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because we actually ran into a female who was traveling by herself, who was going east to west. So we like met her kind of in the middle of Kentucky. I think Zach actually gave her his air horn to like make her feel more safe and comfortable. Yeah. But she was kind of going along with that mindset. She was like, well, I'll tell you what's not working is that I just yell compliments at them and throw dog treats. And so that was her strategy. And she hadn't had anything bad happen, but the yelling compliments was not
wasn't working for her.
Yeah.
Okay, Paul, I was intrigued by in your video, this relationship you Natalie mentioned she has a German Shepherd. You met a buddy little German Shepherd who kind of being your dog champion there. So not all dogs are bad. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your German Shepherd buddy?
Well, I don't think I was going fast enough really to excite their hunting instinct. I'm just kind of tooling along at 8 miles an hour, and this dog jumps out of the woods, and my thing is I just smile at the dog, and instead of yelling, I just say, good dog, and because I've had dogs, and I fancy myself kind of an amateur dog whisperer, and so I try to appeal to the dog's gentler side, so to speak, and just running or just bolting is just going to excite their hunting instinct. And so, I'll stop. And plus, this dog, he just got in front of me. Usually they chase from behind. This dog got in front of me, and I almost had to run him over. And so I had to stop. And as soon as I stopped, he just wanted to play. So it wasn't a typical dog encounter, probably. But like you say, every biker has their dog stories. And I've got some scary encounters with dogs too. Probably the scariest one happened in Georgia. Feral dog. The ones that have owners are no problem, because the owner's probably not far away. But the feral dogs, they scare me. And I've been chased by a feral dog once.
At one point in the video, you mentioned that you had actually encountered some other dogs, and this German Shepherd who was hanging out with you, seemed to be your protector a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's the smile on my face. When I see a dog, I just light up, and I try to show the dog that I'm not an enemy. And if they want to be friends with me, I'm willing to be friends with them. And maybe just the body language or, the facial expressions, the tone of your voice. If you sound mean and aggressive, then they're more likely to respond mean and aggressive. So when I meet a new dog, I try to appear friendly and try to make friends with the dog. And I think they can pick up on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, unless it's just a dog with a mean disposition to begin with. I've been chased by some of those too.
If it's okay with you all, I'd actually like to bring up the Ride with GPS page for the route and use it as a visual reference. Basically use it to jog your all's memories about the features of U.S. Bicycle Route 76 through Kentucky and anything that you think is worth highlighting that might prove useful to other cyclists who are interested in making the journey. What we're looking at is basically the Ride with GPS map. I've got some resources on KentuckyCycling.org, but this is basically a copy of the Ride with GPS route. One thing that's really nice that Adventure Cycling Association does is, at least for the U.S. bicycle routes, they put all the Ride with GPS files out on their website. We're seeing the profile here. This is traversing the state from west to east. And you all rode a total of 485 miles basically across the state of Kentucky. And these elevation charts are notoriously inaccurate. So, you might have ended up with more elevation than this, but this shows it is of about, close to 30,000 feet of climbing as you go across the state there. What I'd like to do again is just kind of zoom in and, kind of look at some of the little towns as we go through, and you all tell me, where you made stops. Just kind of stop me as we go through this. And if you feel like, hey, there's this cool place to eat here, or there's this, this is where we stayed on this particular, day, and what you liked about, anything that would be useful, you think would be useful for cyclists to know about. So you cross the ferry, which is kind of something that's interesting. So when you go across, is there anything about, that people need to know about that experience?
Everybody that I meet talks about the ferry at Cave and Rock. It's real quaint. It's real, you could cross on a bridge, but the ferry's just way cooler.
We actually stayed in Cave and Rock. We stayed at the state park, started our morning crossing the Ohio River. And so it was like a really nice, we caught the first ferry. So we were making sure we were up and able to get down there. And it was literally just like the two of us, 2 cars, and then like a logging truck that was on the ferry. So it was a really cool, just like a nice way to start the morning before we started. You can see before you start climbing a little bit there as soon as you cross into
up from the river. Got to get
Exactly.
out of that river valley.
For other people who want to do it, you don't really have to plan at all, is the nice thing. It's totally free, and it runs like every 20, 30 minutes or something like that, almost 10, 12 hours a day. So you just show up and hop on.
Stayed in Marion, Kentucky, at a B&B, really nice. As you go through Sebree, I always hear that that's the best hostel on the route, is that Sebree. There's a church, the Baptist church in Sebree. I didn't stay there, but they always tell me that the hostel in Sebree is the best in Kentucky.
So you stayed at a bed and breakfast in Marion. So that was into your day.
Yes.
Okay, and then you guys were beginning your day, so I'm assuming you just rode through Marion. I guess for either one of you, since you're both kind of moving this direction, where was your lunch stop? Do you remember?
I don't.
We stopped, I don't remember the name of the town. It might have been Sebree, actually, because I remember we didn't stop at the church that Paul mentioned, but I do recall there's a decent number of like hostel type places and random churches that will put people up in different places, but most of them you have to know where to look. I remember that one in particular, they actually had a big sign up front saying, welcome cyclists, bike hostel, something along those lines. So no, that one was easy to find. The lunch that we did there actually wasn't anything fancy. We just stopped at a gas station and picked up our go-to, most gas stations carry the same brand nationwide. I forget what the name of the brand is, but a chicken Caesar wrap, which proved to be pretty good fuel across the way.
Good deal. So you guys mentioned needing to know about Hostel. So, and prior to beginning recording, Zach was pulling out his adventure cycling maps. And so for those who aren't familiar with adventure cycling, you know, they've got really great maps for definitely for all these routes, as well as all the US bike routes, but as well as many others. Is this Hostel something that was referenced in that bike map as an example?
Yes.
Yeah, the adventure cycling does an outstanding job. Like, we had the paper maps as well as the GPS maps. And so I think that was really helpful, because like when we were having our downtime, you can look and plan ahead, and it had everything that you would need, like food, groceries, places for hostels, places for hotel, motels, any type of, you know, if you needed to go to a bike store, local libraries and churches and things like that, and are all listed, as well as, you know, emergency contacts for like sheriff's office or the courthouse and things like that for all the towns. And so it just gives you a good heads up of what to expect. And that helped us like plan food stops and where we knew there could be services and where we knew there weren't going to be services. So we had a long stretch, so we need to carry more with us. So I cannot like sing praises, both Zach, like sing praises of adventure cycling, because without the maps, it would have been a totally different trip. It made it so easy.
Out of Sebree, you all would have crossed the Green River, passed through Beech Grove, and you guys I'm just gonna walk through the map, and you stop me when you think there's something interesting to point out.
We ended up stopping in Utica, which is now just not kind of towards the right of your screen. Yeah. And this is where we did something a little bit different here. We stayed in Utica, but we have family friends that are actually up in Owensboro, which will claim to have the best barbecue in Kentucky.
Yeah.
So our parents were with us at this point. So we stopped in Utica, but then hopped in the car and went up to meet friends at a local barbecue joint that was very good.
I stayed in Utica in 2016 at the firehouse, so I was expecting to stay there again this past summer. And when I got there, they didn't host bikers anymore.
Oh, okay.
And so I was kind of in a predicament. But fortunately, at the gas station, there was a phone number on the wall that said any biker that needed a place to stay, just call this number. And I called, and it was warm showers set up.
Oh, nice.
Where they let me stay in their barn. So I was like, cool. Yeah, you got to stay current. Some of the places that used to host bikers, they don't anymore.
Right.
So get those current information.
Yeah, well, that's great. And warm showers, I've not ever utilized them. For those who are not familiar, warm showers is a website where basically people, definitely all across the U.S., I guess it could be broader than that, will host cyclists who are coming through, and they offer various services. Some people let you camp on their property, other people put you up or let you use their shower or whatever, as the name implies. So good resource there. Is Camp Pennyroyal, you guys know anything about that?
No. Remember going to the grocery store, though. I even took a picture of it.
Cool.
The next place that I remember, Falls of Rough. That would be the next place that sticks out in my mind. Maybe that's too far ahead.
No, it's not. It's okay. So lots of rolling farmland, I'm assuming,
right.
out here.
Again, because of the pandemic, a lot of the hotels were closed still by the time I got there, and I was hoping to stay at a hotel. I ended up having to camp out at is it TVA, Tennessee Valley. They run all the campsites. Anyway, I had to camp out instead of a hotel at Falls of Rough, but it's a nice place. It's really nice.
Good deal. All right, so continuing west. So do you actually see when you're, do you remember, like, is this crossing a dam at Rough River State Park? Yep. So you can see the lake there?
Right. The dam, no, it's run by the Army Corps. That's right.
Okay.
The dam is run by the Army Corps. Yeah,
and engineers. Okay, good deal.
Yeah, one word of note, I guess, for riders, Falls of Rough, like many state parks, you just have to be careful when you're cycling around there, particularly if you're there around the weekend, or we made the mistake of riding through the Ozark National Forest area the week of July 4th. It can get really crowded, a lot of vehicle traffic, and they're not, if people are in their RVs or towing boats, they're not always looking for cyclists. So you kind of have to be your own first line of defense.
Gotcha. All right, so you make your way around the lake. There's some little restaurants and things along the way here. Rocky Top Craft Shop, that's off the beaten path. That's not right on the thing. Hudson Grocery. So traveling west, what's the next thing that you guys?
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot.
A lot of rural.
Yeah, we ended up, I think White Mills was the next place where we stopped. And just past that is Senora, which is a decent sized town that had a few options for things.
What did White Mills have? Any resources there?
Not much, to be honest. Like there were some gas stations and things like that.
But listen, when you haven't had access to anything, the gas station is a totally legit resource,
Yeah, that became our go-to. We would often either stop at gas stations for lunch or the night before go out to dinner and maybe order a sandwich to go, and that would be lunch the next day. We tried to be prepared and self-service through a lot of the rides so that we would have all the food and water for the most part that we would need for a full day on us at the beginning of the day.
Yeah, that's good.
Some of the rides, especially when you start doing a lot of climbing and you're just sucking down water, we would try to make sure there were places to refill if we needed it. Because we had like Camelback bladders we could fill up as well. Mm-hmm. That adds a lot of weight. So if you don't have to fill that up in the morning, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, good deal. Knowing that you're going to have access to, potable water and these kinds of things. So, and I think it's really, a lot of I don't know how much you experienced this. You mentioned that you found a particular brand of sandwich wrap, that you found that was well stocked. In my more limited experience, there's sometimes gas stations will have delis and they'll make sandwiches. And so, I've definitely had the experience being out riding where I might have gone there for breakfast and then gone ahead and had them make me a sandwich for lunch, while I'm there, kind of thing. So, all right. So Senora has looks like a big pilot travel center there.
I would say that one of the downsides of the adventure cycling route is they do take you way off the beat. They're not taking you through real populated areas where there's lots of services and lots of restaurants. They're taking you through real rural areas and real small little towns where, there might only be a gas station.
Right.
There's pluses and minuses. There's way less traffic, but yeah, my next stop I think was in Bardstown.
Okay.
Which there's a state park there that's called My Old Kentucky Home.
Yep.
Is that where that is in Bardstown?
Yep, I've actually camped there. Yeah.
That's a nice place.
Oh, that's Howardstown. Howardstown's actually got some good gravel cycling for anybody who's watching this. But let's see, going on up to Bardstown here. And if you all...
Yeah, I don't mean to be zooming ahead, but a lot
No, that's fine. And you start seeing some distilleries pop up.
Yeah. New Hope sounds familiar.
Loretto is interesting. So Marion County is a big Catholic population in Kentucky, and there's a Sisters of Loretto. I did a north to south bike tour event that happened years ago called the Governor's Autumn Bike Ride Across Kentucky. And there's also the Abbey of Gethsemane is not too far from here. But so making our way up to Bardstown. No, that's.
I'm actually. Yeah, Springfield, and I'm not sure Bardstown, if the route actually intersected directly through that. I think it got close. Springfield was another stop.
Yeah,
for
Springfield's on.
Okay.
Yeah, Springfield is actually by Paul's right. By adventure cycling standards, Springfield is a big city.
Yeah,
that was a nice stop, and I actually think that was where we found there was a real nice. I don't recall the name of it, but there was a nice kind of deli ice cream shop downtown there. That was a really refreshing change of pace on a hot day.
Yeah, good deal. Yeah. anything that can cool you down is welcome. So Lincoln Homestead State Park. So the route goes right past this Lincoln Homestead. You guys have anything to say about that?
I wish we'd
Stop
stopped
there.
there, actually. Natalie and I did that when we were kids. It wasn't super clearly signed, if I remember it correctly. We kind of realized it as we were passing it, that it was there. This was a day when we were trying to get to Lexington, and we were trying to beat the weather. So we were not prepared to stop. But if we'd known that was there, we might have.
Paul, and I think you mentioned this. Of course, you're an Illinois guy, so you know Illinois is the land of Lincoln, right?
Yeah.
So here we Kentuckians are wanting to claim Lincoln as well, since he was born here. So hopefully there's enough of Abraham Lincoln to go around.
Yeah, he lived in Indiana for a while too, so Indiana tries to claim him too. There's some Lincoln sites in southern Indiana.
Good deal. So did you stop here, Paul, by any chance?
Yeah, it was under construction, so it was closed at the time. So I
Okay.
took some pictures and moved on.
All right. So you I guess varied off to Bardstown, sounds like.
Yeah.
Looks like Macville.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot, if I recall correctly. There's really not much between Springfield and Harrodsburg. Is the
Okay.
next major stop.
Well, Harrodsburg's a little bigger town.
Right, Harrodsburg's nice.
And did you guys do anything in Harrodsburg?
Not in particular, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any
And this is where
resources?
we hopped off the route. You can actually see on the map Lexington Drive there. Hopped
Yeah.
on that and headed up to try to get to Lexington, but
Gotcha. And got caught in the rain.
got caught in the storms. Yep.
All right. And this crosses over Herrington Lake. Do you remember doing that, Paul?
No, not in particular, no. A lot of it's still a blur. I just kind of put my head down and keep riding.
Yeah, I hear you. Route goes through Bryantsville, Three Forks. These are a lot. This is very, very rural out here. I guess the next big town after Harrodsburg is going to be Berea. So did any of you guys stop in Berea?
Yeah, I did. There's what is it called? Boone's Tavern.
Boone Tavern. Yeah. Did
It's
you
a
get
nice
any?
restaurant.
Did you have any spoon bread, which is like
I think I did. Yeah.
somewhat akin to cornbread, a little lighter consistency, you know, to it, but it's kind of what they're known for, right in the center of town. So this is interesting. So they put you along Walnut Meadow Road. Did you all ride along the multi-use trail in the town at all, or did you ride on the road?
I was on the road.
There's actually a multi-use trail that comes right up into the center of town where Boone Tavern is.
We hopped on the trail
Yeah.
into Berea College. And then we ended up, we had like packed a lunch. So we ended up hopping off in Berea and taking a little break. There's like a church right on, I think, like that turn.
Yeah. There's like a Union Church is right here.
Yeah. So we ended up just like hanging out and having lunch on the steps.
Okay.
Church, and then kept moving.
All right, and then 21 goes out, and I'll say we actually I went to Berea College, and my wife's from this area, so I've ridden more in this area, more familiar, and I've ridden. I know that this is not an insignificant hill when you get out here to it's actually easier than it used to be. So Paul, if you've done these different times, I don't know the first time you did this. They actually have blasted a new pass through here. So this is 4 lanes through here with a wide shoulder kind of coming up this big hill, which is called, this area is called Big Hill, and it takes its name from going up into, from Madison County up into Jackson County. But I guess this is where things start really getting more difficult.
Yeah, I'm looking back at some of the GPS data that we had. We were in the western part of Kentucky doing most days, around 3,000, 3,500 feet of climbing a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we got east of Berea, it was 5,500 to 6,500 feet of climbing a day. So just,
significant.
a lot more.
So Clover Bottom, Sand Gap, Juanetta, I guess they say. I'm not sure. I'm going to start mispronouncing names here, I'm sure. Or maybe somebody says Juanita, I'm not sure. Let's see, McKee. You would pass through McKee up in Jackson County.
Remember McKee.
The one thing I'll say about this part of Kentucky, when you're cycling through it, there's a lot of these little tiny towns, but a lot of them don't have much there. Maybe a gas station, and that's about it. You know, if you're looking for hotels as an example, there's just not that many options. If you're camping, there's a little bit more flexibility, but there's not a whole lot of formal campgrounds either. It's, you know, on the maps it might say call the gas station and they might let you pitch a tent behind the back kind of thing. So it's, depending on what your comfort level is, there's limited lodging.
Well, Natalie and Zach, what did you guys end up doing?
Primarily we're staying in hotels at this point. We actually had to go a little bit off route just north of Booneville. What was the name of the town?
Booneville.
Just north of Booneville was Beattyville. We ended up staying up there.
All right.
So that was the only place we could find to stay.
And what about you, Paul? Was Booneville someplace that you camped?
Yeah, there was a Presbyterian church there in Booneville. They had a shelter out back, and they let cyclists camp out under the shelter. And there was another cyclist, so I had to share the shelter with him. That was fine. Booneville, there was a free hostel.
Good deal. And did you have access to showers or anything, or was it just shelter and water?
Fortunately, no. There was no running water there.
Okay. So shelter. Okay.
Yeah, just a shelter. It was about a quarter mile from town, so, you know, there was groceries and restaurants there in Booneville.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. This section, I mean, especially compared to the western section, I mean, this is looks significantly a lot more up and down going on, and kind of punchy climbs.
Yeah. You get up in it.
And there were some long stretches where there were no accommodations, you know, where you had to kind of plan out.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to stay here because the next night I got to go 60 miles across some major hills, and there's nothing in between.
Right.
Yeah.
Any of y'all remember passing through Buckhorn?
There's a state park there, isn't there?
There's a campground of some kind. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's real nice, real hilly, but it's a real nice place.
All right. And this looks like it goes along some body of water. North Fork, Kentucky, of the Kentucky River. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you ride through by the North Fork. I think we hit the South Fork at another point, and maybe an East Fork. But it's, a lot of it's covered in trees. You don't see that much of the water, unfortunately. And then there's not a whole lot until you get into the Hazard and Combs area, where you start hitting the coal mining, as Paul mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And what I mean, did you guys, in terms of resources, was there anything worth noting around the Hazard, Combs, North Fork area?
There was a Walmart.
Okay.
There's the first
Walmart. Oh yeah, there's a Walmart. Yeah.
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 Hazard and Combs. I mean, that's a good sized city. So you've got everything there you need if you need it. We also, with the city comes more traffic, so we actually tried to get through it as quickly as possible. It's kind of in the middle of the day for us.
There was some construction going on too, where we were for that. And so we literally just stopped. There's like a gas station right next to the Walmart. We just stopped at the gas station and grabbed food, ate it in the parking lot, and then just like kept going, tried to get out.
All right. And you would have passed through Hindman, little town in Knott County.
I think Hindman. Yeah, that's actually, if I recall correctly, there's another. Natalie, that's where we almost stayed at the church hostel there. The host was super friendly and helpful.
Yeah.
This is also where someone offered to buy us a pizza in Hindman too.
Paul, did you stop in Hindman?
Yeah, that was one of my short days, like from Hazard to Hindman. It was only 22 miles. And then I stayed at the Baptist church, and it was really nice. They had, it was in the basement, so it was air conditioned and cool, and they had laundry and a shower. And the pastor there was really nice. There's another biker that stayed there. There was a pizza store right across the street from the church. So it was just real convenient. And Hindman is a little town too. pretty little town.
So we thought about stopping there, but then actually we got super lucky. Just a little bit further up the road.
Lucky.
It was actually probably one of the top 3 or 4 moments of the trip for me. In Pippa Passes, Kentucky, where there is
Alyce Lloyd College.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not actually on the adventure cycling maps as a resource or as a place to stay, but we actually through our church had some connections with Alyce Lloyd College. And so our parents, because we were cycling, so again, this is like a benefit of having them with us. They went ahead and like were able to call Alyce Lloyd College and talk to them, and they were able to basically get us in. And so Alyce Lloyd College hosted us. They have a cabin that they have for like adjunct professors or people who are coming in to give talks to the students, and so they let us stay in that cabin for free. And so
All right.
it was,
so you guys, they did that because of your connections through church, you said. Okay.
Yeah, and I think they mentioned they used to host cyclists and aren't necessarily opposed to doing it, but they used to be on the adventure cycling maps, and they've taken their name off the map, but they're just incredibly good people there. They were so generous to us.
So you passed through Raven, Buckingham. Anybody stop at Fat Daddy's? Is there a place called Fat Daddy's?
no.
This is about the area where it starts getting
Merrill.
where you really start to notice some of the poverty, and
Yeah.
you're really kind of in the backwoods areas, and
Looks rather like they're crossing over something here. Yeah, look at that. That's quite you. Anybody remember this section?
Those are probably one of the 2 peaks is probably when I looked back at Zach and was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. So one of those was probably it, because it was right at the end of Kentucky.
There's not a flat spot on that road, I don't think. It's all uphill or downhill.
All right. And then this is coming up close to the Kentucky-Virginia state line.
I stayed in Elkhorn City. That would be my next. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about Elkhorn City.
Because there was no accommodations between Hindman and Elkhorn City. Did you guys stay in Elkhorn?
no, we
I
went a
heard there
little
was a
bit further.
pizza
We
place in
went-
Elkhorn that the owner.
The owner allowed camping there, Paul, from your video.
Right. But there were no accommodations. There was no showers or anything, and he wasn't open in the morning, so you couldn't use the bathroom. But I heard that if you found the mayor of Elkhorn City, that he would put you up.
Oh,
You went to see
nice.
and knocked on the door and talked to the actual mayor. He's like, yeah, we'll put you up.
It looks like there's like a little railroad museum there. All right, and then you guys would have crossed into Virginia. Right around Breaks Interstate Park, which is known as I've never been there, but known as the Grand Canyon of the South. Did you guys spend any time at Breaks Interstate Park?
Yeah, that's where we stayed. We ended up biking up to Breaks Interstate Park.
What was your impressions of the park?
After a long day of climbing, my impression was there was more climbing to go to get there. Since you can see it's off route. And when we entered into the checkpoint, I guess, to get into the park, we asked how much farther up, and they're like, oh, it's not bad. And it's not bad, but it definitely was more climbing and uphill.
Right.
After
At the end of the day, you didn't want to necessarily do any more climbing at that point, right?
Yeah, but it's beautiful. They have a nice lodge there that has a restaurant, so we ended up eating two meals there, I think, and it just looks out over the Appalachians, and it's beautiful.
Just by way of wrap up, I always ask my guests, is there anything else that I haven't asked you about that you'd like to share with the Kentucky cycling audience?
For me, I'll say it was really biking through Kentucky on the Trans Am was a totally different experience for me than cycling around Lexington. So for all the people who I ride with and for people who I know who are in Lexington or Georgetown and surrounding areas, I think that it was just really cool to experience everything from west to east coast of Kentucky. It's totally different.
I'd just like to say that if you really want to see America and you want to experience what, America's really about, you got to go for a bike ride. And every state's got their own unique personalities, and Kentucky has some very unique things about it. And going across Kentucky is a cultural experience. For me, it is. So it's my favorite way to travel, just for the experiences and the people you meet.
I think that's well said. It's a beautiful state, and very different on the western side than the eastern side. So it's like, just get out there and give it a shot if you're thinking about it, because once you do it, there's no substitute for really getting a first-hand feel for it on a bike.
All right, well, good deal. Well, thank you, all three of you, for being a guest on the Kentucky Cycling Connection series. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
As always, we hope you found this content useful. If you did, please like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks.